All right. Well, good evening, everyone. Happy Tuesday. Happy just following Memorial Day weekend. Really hope everybody had a lovely rested weekend. And thank you to our current military members and former service members for everything that you do. We're really excited to be here tonight for the first event of our College and Young Adult Interest Week here at Memphis Theological Seminary. So thank you so much for joining us. Tonight we will be doing a forum on the question, are young people really leaving the church? It's a topic of conversation that is really popular today. It's something that we're all concerned about, but we do want to know if it's happening in people's personal context, what they're doing about it, what tools they have to bring youth into the church context, and all those sorts of things. So we're going to take a deep dive into that, and you'll get to meet all of our panelists before we get started. But did just want to let everybody know, again, this is just the first event of our week, the College and Young Adult Week. If you are interested in attending events later on this week, which will include a chapel service tomorrow at 11 a.m. led by U of M students, represented by Morgan up there in the corner, led by current alumni, recent alumni and current students at MTS. You're welcome to join us for that chapel service. Immediately following chapel at about 12:30, we will be having an alumni panel as well, where we'll have quite a few alumni speak on their experience at MTS and answer any questions you might have. And then finally, Thursday, we have 2 different times for admissions presentations. So I'll go over the details on that at the end and how to join us for the rest of those events. But right now, I do just want to take a minute to have all of our panelists introduce themselves. Y'all, thank you so much for being here tonight. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Woodbury Moore to introduce herself. Go ahead.
Thank you, Luke, and I appreciate being here. As Luke stated, I am Christy Woodbury Moore. I graduated from Tuskegee University with a chemical engineering degree. Then I went on and moved to Minnesota to receive an MBA. And then after that, I went to the Samuel DeWitt Proctor School of Theology to receive my MDiv and my DMin. I am faculty at MTS. I just started this past August, and I am assistant professor of spiritual formation, and I am responsible for supervised ministry there. Some projects that I'm working on, I'm considering right now the Enneagram and formation, trying to see how the Enneagram can help in formation, of course, of new seminary students. I will pass it to Mr. Justin Johnson.
Oh my, well, good evening. My name is Justin Johnson. I am a current Master of Divinity student at Memphis Theological Seminary. I am rounding into my last year. So prayerfully, we'll be out of here next May. I currently work as the Director of Finance at Mississippi Boulevard Christian Church in the greater Memphis area, and I also serve there as a lay minister. And my other degrees, I have an undergraduate degree in accounting from the University of Memphis and a Master of Business Admin from the University of Memphis as well. I'm excited to be here tonight, and I will pass it to Reverend Sis.
Hello, everyone. My name is Reverend Sarita Collins, affectionately known as Reverend Sis. The young people gave me that name. I have a bachelor's degree in criminal justice. I am exploring my next steps in ministry. I'm an ordained minister in full connection in the Christian Methodist Episcopal Church, and I serve as our Connectional Youth Ministry Director. And I'll pass it to Morgan.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you to Memphis Theological Seminary for the invitation to be here, and I'm just excited to be in the conversation tonight. My name is Morgan Stafford. I serve as the Executive Director of the Memphis Wesley Foundation. I've served there for 3 years, preparing to start year 4. I am a graduate of Belmont University, Bachelor's Business Administration, and of Perkins School of Theology at Southern Methodist University, Master of Divinity. So excited to be here, a friend and community partner of MTS. Excited to be a part of the chapel service tomorrow as well with some of our student leaders. So thank you all.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you all to the panelists for being here. Y'all, I know that coronavirus has put a hamper on a lot of plans. It's made life a lot difficult in a lot of ways, but it does allow us to come together in these virtual forums and have these really amazing conversations from very different places without having the exhaustion of travel and all of those sorts of things. So thank you all so much for being here tonight again. I did want to open up the conversation with just kind of a framing question. Again, we're speaking tonight on this idea about young people leaving the church. This is something that's really happening. So I did a little bit of research into some of the statistics that are being produced to show that this is something that is happening. A new Lifeway research study shows that 2/3 of young people, 67%, stop attending church for at least a year between the age of 18 and 22. And then a recent survey done by the Pew Research Center shows that 4 in 10 millennials now say that they are religiously unaffiliated. And so millennials and the generation that follows them, which is known as Gen Z, are actually the only 2 generations in the country that are more likely to identify as non-religious than as Christian. And so kind of using these 2 statistics, just wondering what your thoughts are. And I want to pass it off to Dr. Woodbury Moore to start.
Nice, thanks. So I did some research too. And what I found is that the research suggests that the shift in religious loyalty is actually in line with the cultural shifts that are happening each century, right? And so each century there's this shift that happens. If we remember even the Enlightenment period and the shifts that happened with that, these shifts are in line with that. So this is not a surprise. I think the other piece as it relates to millennials, they do not want to be put in a box. They are not interested in the labels that are associated with religion and what it means to be Christian or what it means to be Muslim or any other religion for that matter. And they are of the mindset that they want to engage critically what's happening in religion. And so they will not just take a canned script about why you should be Christian or why you should be a part of the church. And so what we're seeing really, which really makes sense. I mean, to be quite honest, some baby boomers and even Gen Xers might have even considered leaving the church. We just haven't gotten the courage to do it, right? And so the millennials are really doing the thing that we even are thinking about when we're sitting in the pews these days. They're actually kind of stepping out and they're considering how different pieces of religion can create that necessary spirituality, if you will, that they're looking for. So I'm not really surprised at this shift that is happening in the church and with millennials. Should I pass it off, or you want to do it, Luke?
I see a lot of head nodding. I just see a lot of excitement to respond. So does anybody want to jump in there?
Yeah, I can jump in. Yeah, I totally agree with Dr. Moore. I would agree that the statistics are not shocking, specifically to the first part of that, between dealing with 18 to 22-year-olds. Part of that is they're transitioning to college, and so if I reflect back to when I was in college, the reality says that my church attendance was inconsistent because I am transitioning to adulthood. I'm transitioning to a life without the protection of my parents. And my church family. But I also think that there has to be a conversation around what happens to that group after they come out of children's church and youth church. So part of the reason is that we've built churches, people talk about the segregation of the races on Sunday, but we've also segregated the ages on Sunday. And so we have children's church, youth church, and then when I turn 18, I'm kind of left to my own devices until I go off to college and I come back, and then I can come back to adult church. And so if I am one of those kids who don't go off to college and I'm left and all of my friends leave, I don't have a motivation for continuing to come to church in terms of that. Specifically as it relates to millennials, I think to Dr. Moore's point, I think a lot of people, young and old, have questions just in general about the Bible. They got questions about Christ. And I don't think the church as a whole has done the appropriate job with addressing their questions and concerns. And so I think many have just opted to say, you know what, if you are not going to address my questions, if you're not going to address my concerns, then I will opt out. So those are, my thoughts.
Yeah, Reverend Cece, it seems like we don't have a lot of surprise at kind of the statistics that we're hearing, but we do have some different kind of reasons for why this is happening. We've heard that it's definitely a transitionary period for 18 to 22-year-olds. There's a big disconnect between young people in the church and older people in the church. Is that something that you're seeing in your context? Are there other reasons that you see young people leaving the church?
I think that's the beginning of it. So I'm in a unique position that I minister to the Gen Zs, but I actually have a millennial living in the house with me. So a relationship, relationship is key to this generation. And so when you've only gone to church, and as Justin just stated, you have youth church or you have children's church, or you don't have them, right? And you haven't ministered to those needs. The relationship of now that I'm at a place where I can make the decisions for myself, do I have a relationship with God, or am I just attending church on Sunday morning? And so then when they go off to school or their life outside of high school, I have to make a decision. And is the church that I attend ministering to my needs, what I'm looking for? Is it just church? Is it religious, if you will? Is it really minister to what the deeper sides of what the youth, young adults are really looking for? And I think what happens is there's no denominational loyalty at all. When it get older ones, it's like, okay, I have to stay here because my grandmother built that brick, or she fried fish to make sure that we could keep the lights on at the church. Young people, they don't care about that. They care about, is this church meeting my needs? Is there ministry for me there? And if it's not, I feel like I'm disconnected, and I'd rather go to the place that is going to connect me to where I am, or I won't go anywhere. And I think the pandemic has really pushed young people and even adults, right, to decide what I was dealing with, what I coped with, what I tolerated before the pandemic. I don't have to tolerate that now that we have the pandemic, because now I can have YouTube church. I can have, churches are on a Roku stick now. So I can have any church I want to. I can go to 4 or 5 services on a Sunday morning, get a little here, a little there, a little there, to get what I need. And I don't even have to go to my church. So I think this is just the beginning of what's about to happen. I think now that churches are opening up, I think it's going to force us, those of us who are working in the ministries, to kind of see, how are we engaging these youth and young adults? Are we meeting their needs for real, or are we meeting our needs as it relates to them?
Yeah, absolutely. Would love to hear from Morgan. You're obviously working with college students that's in that age where a lot of students are dropping off from church. How do you kind of see this working out in your context? And what are some of the issues that you see leading to young people leaving the church?
Thank you, Luke, and amen, amen, amen. Across the board, I believe it's important for us to distinguish between religiously unaffiliated and spiritually disengaged. So I would argue, I meet many people my age and also a decade younger, college students, 18 to 25, who are not active in the life of a local church or congregation, but who consider themselves to be very engaged with their faith and their spiritual journeys. And so I think traditional definitions of religious affiliation are becoming less accurate in describing these younger generations. I think it's also important for us to distinguish between these generations that we're talking about, millennial as well as Gen Z. Millennials born before 1995, Gen Z kind of 96 and on. There are nuances between folks my age and folks who are 10 years younger, those who are graduating high school right now. Lately, you may have seen on social media the phrase geriatric millennial, which is good fun, but there's some truth in this as well. I connect with a lot of the descriptors here. And so I think the trend would tell us that Gen Z is even less religious than millennials, but I would ask, is Gen Z less spiritually engaged? I think we have unique opportunities to engage Gen Z where they are, and that's where the relevance of the church that's where that rests, is can we lean in and adapt to the desires, the expressed desires of these younger generations. Gen Z, they are finding their communities, their mentors, their resources, their support with or without the church. And so will the church be a place where these conversations can happen, where these resources can be shared, or will the church continue to do the same things and expect different results? So that's where I'm looking.
Yeah, that was a question I actually wrote as we were kind of, like you had sent the questions ahead of time, Luke. We always talk about our millennials and young people and Gen Z leaving the church. And I wrote, but have we asked, are they leaving God? Right, we have that conversation about whether or not they left the church, but to Morgan's point, right, oftentimes when you talk to people, they'll say, I love God, I pray every day, I read the Bible, I just don't go to church. But I also wanted to tag though, but is it possible that we just haven't made church or God irresistible? Right,
go ahead, Justin.
I was gonna say, you know, when we just think about the things that draw, and I just wonder if we haven't, if it's the way that we live, if it's the way that our churches have presented, you know, these political structures that exist in our churches, if it's watching our families and those dynamics that have been at play over the course of years. You know, I just wonder if we just have not lived out a Christian life or a church reality that has made young people feel like the church is like I think people feel like they can live a better life potentially, you know, without having to be at church.
I think it's all of those things. I think that, you know, we think that young adults are leaving the church, but I think they're leaving a type of church. I think they're leaving a particular style of doing and being the church, right? They're leaving the be at church all day kind of church. They're leaving that. They're leaving the I'm not going to tell you what we're doing with the funds kind of church. Nope, we want to be a part of a church that is transparent, that can share with us how we're living out this mission in the community, right? They're leaving the blind faith, just believe what I say and don't ask any question kind of church. No, they want to be a part of the church that allows them to ask them questions about sexuality. They want to ask questions about financial stability and financial literacy. They want to ask questions about home ownership. They want to know what prosperity really means versus the name it and claim it. They're leaving those kinds of churches, right? They're even leaving the churches that would suggest that this assimilation process called new members class that teaches us how to belong, right? They're leaving the churches that says I have to belong in this way, right? That I want to belong as I am. If you say that I can come as I am, then why do I need to shift in so many ways that changes who I am? And I think they're also leaving this arrogance that the church has. And I'm a member of the church. I'm a first lady of the church. I'm a minister in the church, right? But I can say that there's this arrogance, this field of dreams. If you build it, they will come mentality where, you know, yeah, they might come, but they're not staying. So when are we going to get out of the church and get into the community? Because that's where the action is, right? That's where the ministry work is happening. So I think everything that you said and more, they're leaving that kind of thing. And I think the shift needs to happen in our churches to say, look, okay, we can decide we don't want to be a church for young adults. I mean, we can really say, hey, you know what? Our mission is that we're going to service the elders and the baby boomers or whatever generation. And you know what? I hope the young adults can find a place. Or we can say, you know what? We want to be intergenerational. Now let's figure out, what does that look like for this body? And I think that hard conversation, they're hard, right? And nobody wants to have it, but it's necessary. If we're going to meet people where they are, it's absolutely necessary.
I agree.
So y'all, how do we start doing that work? How do we start bringing young people into the church? How do we start meeting young people where they are? What are you guys doing in your personal context that you think is working well? What are you seeing from community members?
I like what Dr. Moore just said, you know, being transparent on who your church is definitely going to minister to. And I think it will be different. You know, I had a conversation with some young people recently, and everything that they said was about acceptance. And so, you know, we're not going to have that conversation about sexuality. If we're not going to have that conversation that this is, God is for everyone, not just the people that we like and who we want him to be for, we're going to have that difficult conversation. So I really think that we have to decide. And if a church is saying we're not equipped to minister to the needs of this generation, then you give that thing. But to have people come and be a part, but they're not really a part. So I think having an honest conversation, allowing them to be at the table. And if church is for everyone, why is it not meeting the needs of everyone? And are we willing to step out of our normal comfort zone and how we see church, to kind of, help them to see that and figure out how do we meet this need, if we're serious about it. And I always say, how much is it worth to you for a church? How much is it worth for you as the church to open up, kind of come away from what you're just thinking? You want everyone to come in. When you think about, young adults and their work and they're over corporations, but when they start asking about the finances, we don't want to talk about that. No, you don't. We're not going to share this with you. You can't do that anymore. It's a totally different group of people. And so we have to be willing to be honest. We have to be willing to have ownership and allowing everyone to take ownership in a church, even, younger people. And now, if your church is not about social justice, it's kind of one of those things like, well, yeah, we don't want to be there. Truth of the matter is, young people are out there. They're on the streets. They're there. They're fighting. And if we're not meeting that need, we're going to lose them. And they're going to go somewhere where someone is meeting that need. And so I think that hard conversation has to happen sooner than later. And just, where we are now, again, the pandemic is pushing us to reimagine what ministry looks like for everybody. And then we have young adults who are dealing with families and, relationship. They're married, they're single, some of them are divorced. And are we meeting their needs where they are? And if not, they're just not going to be there. So I don't think that they've left completely. I think we don't know where they are because we're not even having conversations and giving validity to what they think and how they feel and where they're feeling that their needs are most being met.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I heard that was amazing. Heard so many great ideas for how to transform a church, to reconnect to young people, being more transparent about finances, and about, kind of the systematic structures, being more accepted, bringing young people into the ownership of the church, really making them feel like an integral part of the community, promoting social justice because it's something that so many young people focus on. Anybody else have any ideas for how to not only re-engage young people, but we had a Facebook question: how do we physically bring young people back into the building? We know that the pandemic is hopefully starting to come to an end. We have a high vaccine rate in this country, and so we're seeing cases come down. We know a lot of churches are opening back up. What other ideas do y'all have to get young people who maybe have not left God, but maybe have left the church, to get them back into that building?
Well, I think we have to maybe get to the point of understanding that the pandemic has brought into reality that they may not come back into the physical building. That doesn't mean that you and your church can't connect with them. I think we have to embrace the digital church space that is available to us. And so I know a lot of churches are having conversations about what it means to be a digital or a virtual member, because it doesn't so much have to be about you coming into our physical space, but there are people who can live across the country who are still engaged, who send their tithes and offerings every week. And so we have to be key to make sure that they are plugged into some version of a life group that meets on Zoom, that we are doing prayer, right? That we do our virtual, Facebook Live prayer calls. I know some people do them on phones, but I would recommend you do them on Facebook Live so that they can see and be connected to the pastor or the spiritual leader. I think you use a podcast. So podcasts allow the opportunity for a pastor or other ministers at that congregation to break down what is currently being studied on Sundays or in the Bible study opportunities. There are so many ways, right? Blogs where you are able to continue to drive home certain messages But content, I think content in this day and age is so important because people are longing to be connected, even if they are not necessarily coming into your physical space. And so, right, everything that Reverend Cece said, right, we want to be connected to the mission of the church. We want to be connected to social justice. We want to be connected to the finances and the overall structure of the church. But if I am not physically in that city, I still need a way to be able to connect. And so one of the things that I have found is that we have a children's pastor, we got a youth pastor, we got a women's pastor, a men's pastor, we got a senior saints pastor. But in a whole bunch of churches, if you go out right now, there are posts for children's and youth pastors all over the place, but very rarely will you see a post for someone who is responsible for the nurturing of young people. And so who is responsible to continue the nurturing when I turn 18 until I turn whatever age you want to say a young person is no longer young, right? And to Morgan's point and Dr. Moore's point, we have to understand, and Reverend Cece's point, we also have to factor in that just because I'm in that age group, I may factor into different areas where I could be married. So we need someone to speak my language as it relates to marriage, right? I have a young daughter, right? My wife and I, we have a 1-year-old. And so I need someone who's going to be able to help me deal with that. And I need someone, right, if you're being divorced. And so we have to be able to provide content for people and an ease to membership, even if they aren't coming into the physical space. But we also have to have the content that speaks to their specific situations, whatever context they exist in.
I want to speak to that too. Luke, I'm not sure our job is to recruit, right? So I'm not sure our focus should be, how do we figure out how to get the people in? I think our focus should be, how do we be the church? How do we be the church? How do we live out the mission of Jesus? How do we do that? How do we go into all the nations and talk about the gospel? How do we feed the homeless and clothe the naked? How do we speak truth to power? How do we do all of these things so that we are being faithful with the thing that God has given us? And then we allow God to bring us the people. We allow God to provide this increase. We do our part, and then we allow God to do the rest. I'm not sure I don't know if it's a good idea to make our focus recruiting youth and young adults. I think our focus needs to be on being the church. I think the other thing is, in the same way that we'll tell our friends about the restaurant that we attended and the restaurant we went to that had great service and a wonderful steak and these great drinks and all this stuff. And don't have a problem with saying that. We don't have a problem with saying that it is Fleming's or it is Cooper Hawk's or some other restaurant. If we care about our church and we believe that it is an awesome place to be, we don't have a problem with telling people about it, right? And so if we can't do that, then we need to figure out, are we in the right space? Do we need to make some shifts in our church so that we can be the evangelist on the job, that we don't have to get a group of people? Because when I go out and you ask me questions, I'm going to tell you about the things that I love, which will include my church, right? And so I think we have to kind of think about that, because I don't want our churches to turn into a recruitment process where we have to figure out how to go get all these people, right? We want to try to make keep the main thing, as my grandmother would say.
I can jump in here. I think starting with these young people that's where we need to start, instead of starting with the church, which inevitably leads us to what's wrong with the church. Let's instead focus on what's right with these young people and the way that they're already living out their faith in the world. We have to listen. We have to listen to them and what they are looking for. And that's contextual. The needs and the desires of the young people who I'm working with in a college environment are different. As my organization, Memphis Wesley, has made the shift from a traditional one campus organization to now in ministry with students across 4 schools here in Memphis, we've had to do deep listening as we engage new students, new to us, to see that the needs are different on different campuses. And certainly over the last year, as students mostly were not physically at those campuses, the needs became different again, and we had to do another round of listening. We couldn't just start with our same programming. there is a young adult in the news right now, quite a bit, Naomi Osaka, right? 4-time Grand Slam champion, and is generating a lot of buzz. Naomi Osaka has said to the institution of professional tennis that I'm not doing this, right? So she loves to play the game of tennis, but she has said, I love myself, and I'm not going to obey and play by these rules just because that's what everyone else is doing. And so she has said to the institution, no more. And I think that's what young adults are doing with the church. They're saying, I love God, and you're not going to make me choose between the institution and my faith. I can be a person of faith and say no to the institution. How does the institution respond?
I absolutely.
Wow, that's powerful.
Right. I absolutely agree with you. It's no more. So for those who are, my generation, we'll stay around somewhere and be unhappy. We'll stay because we got that little loyalty going on. But millennials and Gen Z, they're not going to stay around, and they're going to say enough is enough. I've had enough. And, if you're not going to meet me where I am, and not that they're demanding, I think it's just a basic. We say ministry, meeting the needs, but we don't meet the need. And so I think when we look at what's in our community, what's around us, who's around us, and are we meeting the needs of those who are around us right now in 2021? Are we still trying to meet the needs of 1970 and the people around our churches? There's a complete difference. And I think we're just not. And what Justin said, hybrid church is real. Some people are just not going to go back. And then some people have filled their times with other things, and that traditional Sunday morning worship time is not going to cut it for them. And so the churches that, in my opinion, don't kill me, the churches that are meeting the needs are the ones who are having services on Saturday. They're having services early morning. You can choose between an 8, a 9, 11. You can choose which service you want to go to. And then now we have the internet, which gives us that flexibility that meets our total need. Having life groups is a real thing, and so I find myself now, I've been, especially when it comes to young people, just talking to them. And again, my main ministry is 12 to 17-year-olds, but I deal with all of them. But when you start looking at churches that are having community, they're having the content, as Justin spoke about, that's coming forth, that 15 minutes. I visited this church's Bible study, right? So they started off with 15 minutes of serious content. And then immediately they broke out into breakout rooms based on where people were across the country. I mean, they literally have, young adult Bible study. They have singles Bible studies, married. They have, if you're on the East Coast, the West Coast, or even international, or even locally, in their one Bible study, everybody's needs are being met where they are. They're being able to identify, as Justin said, with those who understand what it's like having a 1-year-old and trying to manage school and life and work. And then somebody else was saying, I'm divorced and I'm trying to understand the same word that was given from the pastor, but I'm actually understanding how it relates to me. And people are flocking to that. And so if we're not willing to think about reinventing how we even see church and how we meet the needs of the people who God has called us to meet. If we're not willing to do that, then who are we really meeting? Who are we really ministering to either?
Yeah, I think the thing that all of you all have said, and I think the church has this thing about how do we get them to come back? How do we get them to come back? When really, like, our responsibility, as Dr. Moore said, the Bible says to go and make, right? Like the Bible says for us to go out and make disciples, and then they will come and see. And so if we are consistent with communicating the gospel in a way that speaks their language or to their particular life stage, if we are consistent as the church with living out a gospel that replicates what Jesus was doing, which is obviously inclusive of social justice and all of that stuff, at that point, young people will then be like, okay, this church looks like it represents a church that I can be affiliated with. But I think we have to be more concerned about just going and communicating the gospel as opposed to having them come in and then trying to morph them into whatever it is that we want them to be.
Luke, do you mind if I
Please,
didn't know
yeah.
if you wanted to move on to the
No,
next
please,
thing.
go ahead.
I was just I just love what Morgan said about this idea of leaving this institution, this system, so to speak, right, for freedom in some ways that that the system doesn't necessarily give us. Metropolitan Baptist Church is the church that I'm a member of, and the church that my husband is the pastor. And we are embarking upon the study with Tom Rainer's book, Autopsy of a Deceased Church. And we're starting that tomorrow. But I think that is, this conversation is so relevant to that conversation, right? Because even in his book, as he talked about, they couldn't see the signs. They weren't ready for the change. Radical change was necessary, but they weren't ready for the change. They couldn't admit, the church could not admit that it was dying, that something was happening and shifting in the church. And I think that we're at a pivotal point as well, right? That there are signs and wonders, right? That we have got to really kind of take a real look at, take the blinders off, and really have a come to Jesus meeting, so to speak, with what we're doing and what we need to do. There's this church in Richmond called Faith Community Baptist Church. The pastor is Patricia Gould-Champ. The mission of the church is very specific. The mission of the church is to meet the needs of 3 project communities that are located right around the church. It is not to meet the needs of the Richmond city. It's not to meet the needs of Virginia, but to meet the needs of Wickham, Creighton, and some other court. That is their mission. I love their mission because the pastor was very intentional about why are we planted here. And I think when she was thinking about that, I'm not sure so many of our churches have thought about that. I mean, our churches have been around for such a long time. When they were thinking about missions at that time, it was probably more broad, right? How to go ye therefore all the way out into the land, right? And so when we thought about mission, we thought very broad. But what would happen if we were to be very specific about our mission? And it's not that we are leaving out the rest of the world, but God has planted us here for a specific reason in this corner to meet the needs of this corner. What would happen if we had that conversation? Now, listen, I know I'll make a whole lot of church people upset when I say we need to reevaluate our mission, because the culture of the church, they don't want to talk about that. But when we think about where we're going, maybe it's time. Maybe it's time to really reevaluate what is our mission, and does it need to be more specific so that we're not so confused every time we need to do a project. Should we be doing this? Well, what does the mission say? Right? Okay, I'm off my soapbox. I'm done, Luke. We're good.
No, I love it. I guess what I'm curious about is there are just 5 of us on this panel, right? When we go into our church context, there's going to be pushback against this idea. I think, if I was to share the idea with my grandmother, for example, who's gone to church every Sunday at 10 a.m. since the day she was born, I swear, until right now, she's 84 or something, she would look at me like I was crazy. And so I guess my follow-up question would be, what do you say to people who kind of push back against that idea, who might say, in-person worship is critical. And not only that, but it's important to not develop, kind of a mentality that it's the have it your way ministry, where you just kind of get to come in and decide what you need out of the situation and then leave. Just wondering what you guys would say to somebody who pushes back in that way.
That's a loaded question. I think it goes back to something that Dr. Moore mentioned before about that restaurant that you would go to. Are you willing to go to that restaurant? And so I think if we begin to look at what is the need of the grandma and what is the need of the child. And so usually when I do workshops, I tell people, we always hear the song Rich and Small, but come over here where the table is spread and the feast of the Lord is going on. And so if I'm 40, I have a husband, I have say a 12-year-old, a 10-year-old, and a 5-year-old. Where am I going to church? And I think when we start telling grandma to look at that, you know, oh, I want my baby in church. Great. But does your church meet the need of the grandbaby? And so if I'm 40 and I'm looking for a church that meets my need, I'm not going to just go there because it's the food that I like. I'm going to go because it's the food I like. My husband's going to be able to get something. They got a children's menu. They got they got that in-between entree menu. And so my whole family can go over here where the table is spread and the feast of the Lord is going on, and we can dine as a family. But if you're asking me to go to a vegan restaurant, but I love seafood, I'm not going. And so when we look at it, it can't just be, if we really want to meet the needs of our entire family, you've got to open up your blinders, grandma. I mean, we're not going to put you out, but if you like the contemporary service or you like the traditional service, whichever one you like, grandma, we're going to keep that. But if you want me to be there, grandma, I need something different. I need something that's meeting me and my family. And I think that's where that young adult age is. They're just not going to do it there unless we're willing to open up. Because if it's all of our church, we've got to do that. But I'm not going to talk about the restaurant that I don't like. And I can choose to go to the restaurant or not. And I think now in 2021 with hybrid church, people are going to go to the restaurant/church that meets their need, that has the food that they want to eat, that they can digest. Come on here. That's where they're going to go. And then they're going to invest into the ministry. You don't mind paying for a good meal if it's a good meal. But if I'm going somewhere and the meal is not good, the word is not good, the Bible study is not good, I'm not going to invest in that. But young adults, they're saying, I'm willing to invest in this ministry if this ministry is a good quality restaurant that I can tell my friends and family about. And I don't want to just worship by myself. I want to be in church with Justin. You know what I'm saying? I want to be in a life group with Justin and his wife and their child. And I don't mind babysitting the 1-year-old so Justin and his wife can go out and they want to still do date night, but they don't have a reliable babysitter. But I can be the babysitter for Justin because me and Justin work together and I understand the need. Justin, go ahead, have your date night. But I'm meeting Justin's need, right? I'm being able to be there for him with the daycare. I love children, so I'm able to communicate with the kid. And then I got a grandchild. They can play and hang out. That's meeting the needs and showing Justin that we love you, Justin, enough that we want your marriage to stay fresh. We want to keep that there for you. And so I think when we start thinking about what the needs are, again, meeting the needs of the people. And I love what Dr. Moore said about that church. They're real specific. I think we want to go out. We want to go overseas and start mission churches, but the one we got here is terrible. That doesn't make it make sense, right? And so we have to look at what do we have here and why are we going way over yonder? And there are some churches and some ministries that are called to do mission work, but there are some that are called to do city work, urban work, and that they need to focus on, you're only good at what God has called you to be. And when you try to take off more than what you're called to do, you're not going to do it successfully.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Please go ahead, Morgan. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm running with the restaurant. So I think we need to allow young folks to sample offerings without forcing them to consume the entire menu.
Amen.
Okay. And can we offer opportunities for young folks to do some cooking too? Are they always consumers at our restaurant eating what we serve? Or can we get them in the kitchen? Can we offer to cook together? Can we share expertise and welcome new plates to the menu? Shout out to Ron Davis and Kayla Wright, two of our young adults who are always cooking in the kitchen with me at Memphis West.
That's good. I'm glad you said that, Morgan. I think that it is a sign when all of the deacons and trustees of a church are 60 and over, but there are but our young adults are CEOs and CFOs and OOOs in corporate America, yet they're not in any of these leadership roles, yet they care for the church, they serve, they do all of that, right? So even as we're thinking about the signs and wonders, right? That is the sign. What is it that we're missing? That when it's time to elect new deacons and trustees, however that process is, according to your bylaws and constitutions, because I know this is church, right? And we got to go by Section 5, Article 6. I get it. But what is it in our Constitution that even suggests that they are not valued, right? I mean, there's a lot of deep work that we need to do as it relates to our young adults, but not just our young adults, but this is a matter of how we see people, how we see humanity, how we understand folks in general as it relates to the church as well. So I don't know. I'm
that's I'm
soapboxing it at this point. I'm feeling good about this conversation right now.
I mean, that's a great point though, because I remember I'm 32, so it's probably like 24 or 25. And I remember being asked like, hey, you should come be a deacon. And I remember saying, well, some comment related to, well, y'all got a whole lot of rules. There was too many rules, right? You got to wear this, you got to sit here, you got to do this, you got to do that. And I'm not saying that rules aren't okay, but I don't think that it was too boxy for me. And so I think we have to go back to the bylaws, right? To where are areas where we can allow for the loosening of some of the structures, right? Not that takes away the integrity of the office or the structure, but the loosening, right? Because if I have a young family, I can't be at the church the way that the 60-year-old deacon can be at the church, right? My time, I'm not retired and I got a lot of other things going on. I want to serve, but I can't serve the same way. And so one of the things that I've been kind of reading about is we have to convert our church leadership from a lifetime achievement award to a subscription model service. And so, we've seen people, you become a deacon at 40, you're a deacon until you die. You become an elder, you're an elder until you die. But what if there are young people who say, to Morgan's point, I want to sample. And so in this season, I want to be an usher. And I want to be an usher for 1 year. And I'm going to commit to being an usher for 1 year. And after that year, I'm going to go commit to being a trustee because I got a finance background, yada, yada, yada. And I want to commit to being a trustee for 3 years, right? And I think that one, not only does that allow people to, get embraced in the church, but they can figure out where exactly it is that they fit. And if we allow people to have all of those opportunities and not be offended when they say, I don't know if the usher ministry is for me. I don't like people that much, right? If we don't get offended when they say, I can't really be a deacon because I don't know if emotionally and spiritually I'm in the space where I can be going to funerals and wakes and calling and praying for people all the time, right? We have to allow people, as we are all on our own spiritual journeys, right? We have to allow that same access to those young people to figure it out. And maybe it might be 40 before they figured it out, but in that time, they have been ingratiated into the life of the church. They've been active. Inevitably, they've probably had their friends coming. They've also become active because I'm gonna hang out wherever my friends hang out. And so we have to move away, I think, from that lifetime achievement award to being okay with subscriptions in terms of church service.
I would just like to say real quickly, it's very clear that you all work with. Oh, sorry, go ahead. No, please.
I was going to say, so my husband is, like I said, the pastor of Metropolitan. And one of the things he's doing is a leadership profile where you have to kind of say, you're a leader, how long you plan to be in this role. What is your succession plan? If you don't have one, it's time to write one, right? Because we're all in some sense interning. It's not that this isn't necessarily permanent. And then what if, like you said, Justin, God is calling us to move into different spaces and we're holding a position hostage where the Lord is ready to bring in a fresh wind and we are still holding on to this position tight, where God is really ready to move us into something that is even more, right? To expand our territory, but we can't see it because we're still stuck. And so this leadership profile helps us to kind of think about think about the fact that our role is not a lifetime achievement, that it is temporary, and we need to think of it as such, because there are those who are constantly coming after us, and there should be, right? And so I'm so glad that you mentioned that.
And also, not just that God may be moving you to a higher level of leadership, but we have to create the space to weed out the people who are not effective in leadership.
Come on here. Come on. Jesus.
But
Yeah.
oftentimes, a lot of the ones who have been assigned these leadership positions, at some point, they may have been effective. But at some point, you get to the point of diminishing returns. And so you just get cranky people. And so we got to be careful that we don't have people who outlive their effectiveness in the role as well. So I think, to your point, the leadership profile allows us to have an evaluation of your service every year or every 3 years, right? And maybe it's just you need to take a year off to go have a sabbatical.
Right.
I think young people will be okay with that. Like, if I don't have to just give my whole life to service, if I can serve for 3 years, have a year off, serve, just to get in that rhythm. But I think there are just so many things in terms of the leadership of the church, and to Morgan's point, allowing us to be able to have access to all areas of the church.
I love what you just said, Justin, that effectiveness. It's amazing that we will not send our children to a school where teachers are not evaluated every year. Although our ministry leaders are not evaluated, our pastors are not really given evaluations that, are you effective in this ministry at this time? And so people do feel like they have to be the Lifetime Achievement Award, because I'm never going to get an evaluation that says that I'm not good at this moment. But I think when you're allowing people to, you talked about the deacon, and allowing people who have skills, like, it amazes me that we have churches that have, these people who are in leadership, who are counting money or handling the church finances, but yet and still we have maybe someone who might be younger, who is the CEO and the chief financial officer of this organization, overseeing budgets of millions of dollars, but we don't trust them enough to see over our couple 100,000. It says a lot more than what we even imagine. And so about a month ago, a young person said in one of the assignments I was doing for leadership, and she said to doubt young people, to not believe in young people starts the cycle of self-doubt. And I'm thinking, like, this is a 17-year-old who is saying that when the church says to me that they don't believe I can do something, at 17, you've already started the cycle of them saying, I'm not good enough. That's dangerous, and I don't know if we even realize sometimes when we say, well, no, Justin, we don't want you to do this, we want you to do this. And Justin said, but I feel like God is calling me, to do Sunday school. And they're like, no, Justin, we want you to do this over here. What are we actually saying? And not allowing people to explore where God is leading them at that moment. I think when we do that, we're saying, we're validating what they're experiencing. Like, yes, you did hear God, right? And where God is leading you is really the right place. And we want you to go and explore there. And if God is saying, okay, now Justin, that you've done this, or now Morgan, that you've done this, now I want to shift you here, because what you have right now is what we need over here at the church. If we don't do that, I just think it's just like a cycle that is not going to get any better. And it's not going to be for where life can grow in our local churches.
And then that self-doubt comes to seminary when they're called to ministry, and they're called, their anxiety is not just, are you sure, God? But it's, are you sure, God? Because I'm deficient in this area. I lack in this area because I tried this at the church and they said no because of this. And so it trickles all the way to seminary. So when it's time to write the papers, I'm not sure I can write it because I tried to write a poem at the church and they told me I couldn't, right? It's trauma, it happens. And so it's an unlearning of those voices that kept telling us no. And even as and so this is a part of formation. This is a part of that work of formation. When they're in the church, they are being formed in some way. And when they come to seminary, we bring that stuff, all of it, good, bad, and ugly, toxic, you name it. And so it's an undoing of a lot of that stuff while they're in seminary. So they want to lead, they want to pastor, they hear the Lord, but at the same time, they hear us. They hear mama, they hear grandpa, they hear all of us. They hear the job, they hear the wife, the husband, they hear us. And so I agree with you that the words, what we say, I'm not sure we understand the gravity of what we're really saying underneath the words, that the rejection that comes along with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Y'all, I've just been sitting here taking notes. I am learning so much right now. I'm loving this conversation. We had a really interesting comment that I just wanted to read out to y'all from the chat box, and just wanted to see if anybody had any specific reactions. It's not exactly what we were talking about, but it does definitely pertain to our conversation. So let me read this. It says, oh, I lost it. Hold on, yeah, sorry. There it is. As a Black youth, many of my friends who left the church have cited that Christianity is just a tool of the oppressors and hold that as a reason to leave their faith. I think that there needs to be a grand public reckoning with how our religion has been used to justify oppression, i.e. the Crusades, American slavery, rampant homophobia, or the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, before youth will be willing to critically engage with the faith. Does anybody have any responses to that?
I'll respond a little bit. So one of the questions that you asked us, one of the as we were preparing, was how do you engage with young people who have doubts about religion? And as I was kind of thinking about that question, it reminded me of a conversation I had many years ago with a few people about why they don't attend church. And part of that was, how Christianity came to be, how it is a tool of the oppressor, everything you just said, right? But before I even get there, I appreciate the doubt. I do not shy away from the doubt, because the doubt is a sign of a level of maturity. It really is. It's not a sign of doubt, and faith can exist together. They do not have to be one without the other. They should exist together, right? Because it is faith seeking understanding, right? And so I am not a proponent of this blind faith. Just do what I say and you'll feel it and boom. Nope, ask as many questions as you want. So I think this is an excellent question, right? How do we do this? Why is it, how do we reckon with the history, this reputation that Christianity has, right? I think it's a learning opportunity, that it's time to lean into the question versus out, right? There's this wonderful book by Kelly Brown Douglas called What's Faith Got to Do with It? And it kind of talks about one of the questions of the book is, how is it you as a Black woman can still be Christian? How is that? And so she sets forth in the book to answer that question by explaining the way Christianity came to be, but also how we as African Americans have taken that Christianity and made it our own, right? And so even as we're thinking about this idea of the white man's religion and all of that, I think it's a learning opportunity. I think it's time to take a look at Kelly Brown Douglas's book and maybe do a book study on the reputation of the Christian faith. Like, I don't think it's as simple as go read this, now believe, and come on the church. No, let's read together. Let's wrestle. Let's reckon with this thing together. And so for those who are on the call, who have friends, or even if you're on this call and you are wrestling with this idea of Christianity, I want you to continue to wrestle. I know it's uncomfortable, but that's all right, because in that discomfort, that wrestle is necessary for you to gain understanding about this faith. And I think it's important that we kind of lean into what are your real questions, and let's do some research. The reason I say that is that Google can give you a lot of stuff. You can Google anything you want and get an answer for everything. That does not mean it's right. It doesn't, because everybody that is writing has an angle. Everybody that's writing has an angle. And until you understand the angle, it is hard for you to not believe what you're hearing. So it's important that we do the research in the right places, that we do the research with the right people, not just with our friends saying, okay, let's go research this stuff, y'all, and figure this out. No, it's important that you do the research with scholars that can help you wrestle with it and think through reliable sources that you can read, right? Which is a part of, right, understanding this thing in seminary, that it's not just basic research on Google, but it's research with people who know how to do research so you can get accurate information.
Yeah, absolutely. Anybody want to add to that, or? Okay, good. Well, that actually brings me to my next question. It's a really perfect transition. In my experience, those kind of hard conversations, those reckonings, sitting down with scholars and scripture, and getting to have those conversations with people around you from different contexts, that's something that you do in seminary a lot. And so I'm just really curious kind of how seminary kind of fits into this picture. Obviously, we are Memphis Theological Seminary. And so, what kind of way does the seminary kind of fit into this? How can the seminary help the church relate to youth, connect to youth, reach youth? Do you guys have any ideas on that?
I think my initial thoughts in terms of how the seminary can be a resource for churches is, I think it's just understanding the reality that we are here, to Dr. Moore's point, wrestling with these thoughts, these ideas. We're talking to people of different denominations. Like, I'm a member of a Disciples of Christ church. I might be the only one that is in all of my classes, right? And so I'm in class with students who are UMC, PC, USA, Baptist, Kojic. So we are wrestling with these different conversations across denominational lines. And so I think in terms of churches who may be having conversations about how do they engage their young people, I think it's reaching out to the students who are currently going through this process of wrestling in this tension. I think there are a lot of churches who may not be in the space to say, I can go hire someone, or I can, I don't know what to do. But there are students and there are professors who are available who can, be there to assist you, to evaluate and provide some recommendations on how, what they see, or back to the conversation that I think Morgan was saying earlier. Every context is different. And so a 25-year-old in rural Tennessee is not going to be the same 25-year-old that is in Memphis. And so, I think it's about really digging into your community. I think Dr. Moore said that too, into your zip code, into the 3 blocks around your church. What is it that you need? And so I think reaching out to students like myself and to professors like Dr. Moore and to other people in the community like Rev Sis and Morgan and all of these people like Luke, who can come in and just say, hey, this is what I see, this is what I discern, and these are the things that you might be able to do that may not cost you any money. Right? I think we have this notion that things cost money, but Facebook is free. Zoom is fairly inexpensive, right? There are so many ways that we can find ways to engage our young people. And oftentimes, to the point, again, that we've made, they're willing, if you have them, they are willing to assist you in these efforts. They know how to use the technology. They know how to use these things. And so maybe you just need someone who can come in and kind of give you a little push. So.
I think in my role as the Connectional Youth Director for my denomination, I think seminaries who are training youth and young adult ministers how to relate to that generation, being able to partner seminarians with churches who may not, as Justin just said, can't afford to have a youth pastor, and may not have a youth leader who understands and who's relatable, able to relate to that generation, but having them being able to be that partner. Seminaries who are able to provide, I guess it would be audit in a class that helps them to understand that generation. I think all those are important. Training, again, we wouldn't keep sending our children to school and teachers are not having professional. I'm an advocate for professional development, and I just don't understand why youth leaders are not regular youth leaders. I'm not talking about a youth pastor, but a regular youth leader is not engaging in professional development, because the way things were 10 years ago is not even relevant now. So having seminaries who have that availability, have those auditing those classes, help people to steer. Maybe a MDiv is not what you need to get. Maybe you need a Master of Arts. Maybe you need some Christian education training. So I think having that availability, I think is great. Partner with people like myself, like Fakisha and I have been, talk about, we have a youth conference this summer, and it has been laid on my heart that, not only am I to minister to young people 12 to 17, but I also need to minister to the people who are leading young people 12 to 17. And so developing a whole track for youth leaders was important to me, because I realized that a lot of churches are not going to per se send their youth leader to a youth pastors conference. Maybe they can't afford it. Maybe don't even know it's there. But I feel like, in my role as a connectional leader, that I need to provide that avenue, provide those resources to help them to be better at what they're doing, ultimately to being able to minister to more young people effectively, and to help them discern the call of God on their life, the direction that God is leading them just in the church, or whether we have young people who are accepting their call to ministry and don't know what to do after that. So I really believe that seminaries would definitely help, and partnering with people like myself would help us to make the need. I mean, literally, I'm in a connectional position, so I'm able to help more than just my church, right? And that helps me to be able to connect so many people to the resources that they need. So I think that would be helpful.
What I love about MTS is that the relationships are always reciprocal. I am a Memphis transplant. I'm not an MTS alum, and yet I can't count how many times I've been invited to campus to be a part of different events, conversations like this. I have always felt at home at MTS, and I think that the relationships are always reciprocal, inviting folks to be a part of what's going on at MTS, but also willingness to partner and to be beyond the walls. So many people come to mind. Dr. Michael Turner, will you come present, to our students about the roots of Methodism and why Methodism is relevant to today? And it's always a yes. Martha Lyle Ford, will you come talk to my students about environmental and racial justice? Yes. Reverend Fakisha Gunn, let's go get coffee. Let's talk about young adults and how we can partner. It's always a yes at MTS. And so I'm just thankful for those partnerships. I suspect that most of us listening in on the call, we probably have some young adults. I know I see a few on the call who I know and am in relationship with. But I suspect a lot of us are practitioners of young adult ministry. And so I think that the seminary is such an amazing partner, because part of our work is to recognize that we can't do it all, that we cannot be everyone's pastor, counselor, best friend. That's not our role. And so as practitioners in young adult ministry, how are we cultivating communities of people who can care for young adults and who can challenge young adults? That's what I'm always looking for in partnerships, as well as in volunteers and those who are a part of our ministry, is who can come in and care for my young adults and who can challenge them to be the best that they can be.
I think everything everybody has said. I think what we're doing right now is necessary. This panel discussion, having more of these roundtable discussions, right? Because we're talking about millennials, but it's time to let them talk, right? Let's have a sit down and let them talk about some things together, and listen, right? Be active listeners in that conversation that they're having about their challenges, their struggles, not just in the church, but in life, like their struggles with trying to find themselves and figure out who they are and who they want to be all of that. I mean, I think that is necessary for us to just kind of listen to that conversation. And, you know, we ask, are they leaving the church? I think it's a good conversation to just ask them, are you leaving the church? Okay, you're not. Are your friends leaving the church? Why do you think that is? Would you invite them to church right now? Would you tell them to come to your church? Why not? And then listen to the answer, even if it makes us upset, not try to come up with the ways they should be loyal because of our own loyalty, but to just listen and hear what they say. Because what I know about millennials is that they're not gonna hold back. You wanna know? They're gonna give it to you, and they're gonna give it to you straight, no chaser. They'll give it to you like that, right? And so it's to just kind of take it in and try our best not to defend our good name, right? But to hear what they really have to say. Of course, I am a proponent of seminary all day long. As faculty of MTS, as a person that is in charge of formation, seminary is important in the journey of theological education, especially if you are considering ministry of any type. In the same way that you want a doctor to have gone to medical school because they are going to be working on your body, I would like to believe that you would want a minister to have gone to seminary school because they will be caring for your souls. And so it is my firm belief that seminary helps you with that wrestle with convictions that this religion that we have, right? We started out with a secondhand religion because we didn't know, right? We started out with what our mothers and our grandmothers gave us. And then life experience knocked on our door and then became firsthand experience. And so now we are wrestling with our own personal convictions as well. And so seminary helps to form you for ministry. You are already formed in some way. You come formed from your families, formed from school, formed from your churches. And now it is time to be formed for ministry, to take all of that and turn it into hone it and polish it so that you can build up people in ministry and not wound them. We don't want a bunch of bleeding people in the church, but we want people who will be whole and that you will be a part of that healing process as well. So if you are wrestling with attending seminary, I say keep wrestling until you get an answer. I don't say stop. I say continue to wrestle, continue to ask the hard questions. And I'm not saying you have to come to MTS. Yes, you have to come to MTS, but not really. You have to go wherever the Lord is leading you, which will be MTS, but you know what I mean. You have to just find your place. Hopefully it's MTS. I'll just leave that there.
Well, Dr. Woodbury Moore, that was perfect because if you are still discerning, we have more events this week. So I do just want to real briefly share the flyer before we bring it back to the panelists and thank everyone, just so you guys can see exactly what's going on. I actually, for some reason, my screen is not working, but just to let everybody know, we do have a chapel service tomorrow at 11 a.m. We will have 3 different preachers presenting a 5-minute sermon on why young people are so valuable. And so that'll be really wonderful. It's going to be 1 current student and 2 recent alumni. So we're really, really excited about that. We'll also have Morgan and some of his students around to help present. So we are really delighted to have them in person. Oh, then my screen is working now, y'all. Technology. There it is. So there's the chapel right there. We will also be following that chapel service with a panel where we will have recent alumni come and talk about what it was like to attend MTS, why they pursued a theological education, why they ended up deciding MTS, what they did while they were there, and what it's been like since they've graduated. And then finally, we will have 2 different info sessions this Thursday, one at 12 o'clock and one at 6 o'clock, where you can come, hop on Zoom or Facebook Live and just learn what it's like to attend Memphis Seminary, what programs we have, what it's like to be in a classroom environment, what student activities we have available, our professors, our faculty, all those sorts of things will all be available. Y'all, if you're interested, the information is all over Facebook. But you can also just send me an email at lwaters@memphisseminary.edu, which I will type in the chat in just a minute. I did want to point out that Reverend Gunn did share several book recommendations by Dr. Moore. So some really lovely literature that you should definitely look into if you enjoyed the conversation tonight. Before we wrap up, I just wanted to thank everybody, the panelists, for attending. Y'all, I learned so much. I'm literally about to go type up these notes so I can keep them on hand, because maybe this is partially my job to engage with people, especially young people who are interested in this sort of work. So yeah, thank you all so much for being here tonight. Yeah, thank you all. Really appreciated it. All right, well, with that, we will go ahead and end our Facebook Live. Thank you so much for being here. And please join us for events later on this week.